Mr. Tebow, I heard you say a little earlier that you support diversity as at least one variable to focus on to either admit in the service academy, students in the service academies or officers evolving. Is that officer promotion? Is that right?
What I said, Mr. Goldman, is that I am willing to accept and support diversity as a byproduct of good military policy. It's not something we should, certainly not something we should avoid, but it's not something that the military should cater policies to promote. That should
do you think that diversity of backgrounds is beneficial to the military?
As it relates to a person's ability to do a job in the military, yes. If something doesn't, if a capability doesn't exist in the military and we need someone with a more diverse background to do that job, then yes, it's important. But what I don't think that means is that a person's skin color is relevant to those jobs. You know, in the House Armed Services...
I hear you, and I'm going to just follow up on that. I mean, because I think there's some contextual things that we need to talk about here, because you and Mr. Lohmeyer are talking about merit-based, and focusing on that. But you know, when you look at the history of discrimination in the military, what you have to consider is that everybody does not start from the same place. So Mr. Sedgelay's family, growing up with a general in the military, has advantages in terms of entering the military that someone whose family does not have would not have. You agree with that, right?
Yes.
Okay, so if the military was segregated, if non-whites and women were not allowed, if the LGBT community, because of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, were not allowed, you therefore understand how those people from those different groups are not starting at the same place in terms of evaluating, quote, merit-based, right?
But Congressman, I think that's a false binary. The choice is not between discriminate against non-whites and, you know, choose anyone.
I'm not talking about discriminating. I mean, there are only a certain number of people that can be admitted to a class, that can be promoted. And if you're basically saying that you cannot consider anything else other than what you call pure merit, and there's no definition for pure merit, you are necessarily perpetuating discrimination that has occurred for generations. And when you start to see things such as government reviews, the Air Force independent review that said 40% of, in 20 and 21, 40% of Black and African American service members indicated a lack of trust in their chain of command to address racism, bias, and unequal opportunities, you are necessarily not acknowledging, not addressing what is a fundamental problem not only for retention but also for promotion. And if women are leaving the service 28% more because of sexist culture, family planning, or sexual assault, that has to be addressed. That you cannot, I do not believe you are sitting here and saying that it is okay. You mentioned something about you support training on harassment, but if there is implicit or explicit racism or discrimination, you would agree that has no place in the military, right?
Of course.
Okay. There needs to be training because a lot of people don't know what that means, and they often don't know that what they are saying is actually discriminatory. So there needs to actually be training so that everyone from every walk of life in this country can have an opportunity to participate, to represent our country, to be in the military. And the problem that we run into when we try to say purely race-neutral, merit-based, and, you know, once again, we're obviously talking about a disproportionate number of white people, primarily, who are in positions of authority, who are elevating people, who are admitting people. If they are not trying to address some of the historical wrongs to give people who have not had that access to the military, to this opportunity, give them that opportunity, then we are just going to perpetuate the historical discrimination forever. So I'm not saying merit doesn't matter. I think it absolutely matters. And I certainly understand Mr. Lohmeyer's point that we do not want to put people who are unprepared in bad situations. But to simply say that diversity should have no impact whatsoever on our military will continue to perpetuate a discrimination that is unfortunately embedded in our military's history. And with that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Perry.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and gentlemen, God bless you for your service. I really, really appreciate your sacrifices on behalf of this nation. As often is the case, my position here up on this dais is my 5 minutes, most of it will be spent correcting, in my opinion, the record of the things that have been said previous as opposed to the questions I might have asked each of you. So I'm going to go through a couple things here, and maybe it's not only correction, but it's clarification of the record, as I would like to say it. Sure, Mr. Seidel, is that how you say your name? Sidgley. Sorry about that. My apologies.
My mother got it wrong for years.
I'm sure. The name tag was probably difficult. I just want to make the remark and the point that the segregationists that blocked integration were decidedly in one political party. And I think it's important to note that because they will be up here acting like they never did that. And it's important for the historical record as a fan of history that, that you can appreciate that there are consequences that America cannot forget and should not forget. Regarding diversity, I hear that all the time, diversity is our strength, diversity is our strength. And it's, Mr. Thibault, you just answered a bunch of questions about that, and it is a strength when we have different viewpoints about how to solve a problem. But if we're all in a boat, a rowboat, there's 4 of us in a rowboat, and we all have a different idea of where we're going in a different oar, diversity is not going to be much of a strength, right? We're all going to be rowing in 4 different directions. So diversity is a strength, and we're all pointing in the same direction. Otherwise, it's not a strength. And I don't know how that can be refuted, but if somebody wants to, they're welcome to do that. Regarding the comment that there was a defeat in Vietnam, I want to make sure, because I grew up during that time, as you did, I imagine, sir, just gauging from seeing you here, it was not a military defeat. It was people like Walter Cronkite and other leftists and political activists in the United States of America that imposed that defeat, and it's important to me. I revered my uncle when he came home from Vietnam in his uniform as a guy who served and the sacrifices he made, and it colored my decision to join the military. And it's important, again, for the record, to remind Americans that the military did not lose that war. That was a politically lost war, and I don't want that to be attributed or ascribed to the military. Regarding the McCarthy hearings, I want to remind everybody in the room that while I disagreed with his tactics, as most Americans did, if they read Whittaker Chambers' book Witness, and if they go through the Venona transcripts, almost every single person he named was a communist sympathizer, organizer, and involved in the subversion of the United States government. Let's not forget that. Regarding those folks that were held up by by Senator Tuberville and the fact that they didn't complain, well, good for them. Because when we wear the uniform, yours is not to question why, yours is just to do and die. And we don't talk about political things because it is against the regulation. So they weren't doing anything grandiose. They were doing their duty as they should. And Tuberville was doing his duty as he should. The policies in the military regarding the subject at hand are wrong. And thank God somebody was willing to fight for them. There is a specific definition for merit. I would ask my colleague, he can go look up any search engine and see it. I joined the military, and I love my time in the military. It defined me, and I defined it. And it was based on merit. And I didn't have a leg up. I knew my uncle who served in Vietnam, but when I raised my hand as an E1, no one knew anybody I knew, and it didn't matter. And I love the fact that even coming from a broken home with no connections and no clue about anything, I could work my tail off and make something of myself. And even though I didn't have my commander's recommendation to go to officer candidate school, I got into officer candidate school, and I became the president of my class. And even though I didn't have a recommendation to go to flight school where you're measured within 1/10 of a point, I graduated second in my class alongside soldiers and service members from the Air Force Academy and West Point, of which I was not allowed to go to because I wasn't good enough. And I wasn't good enough. But the point is I worked my tail off because it was based on merit, and I could make something of myself. And while I complained to myself, I didn't complain to anybody else when I tried to get an inter-service transfer from the Army to the Air Force, because instead of flying Cobras, I wanted to fly F-16s, and a friend of mine, he got to go. He was a black man. But when I applied to the same unit, I was told, sorry, you don't fit the position. You know what I did? I got after my job as a Cobra pilot. I got after my job and I went on with my life. I didn't cry my eyes about it. There's a bunch of people that are up on this dais today that are going to complain to you and tell you about your life in the military who have never served and don't have a damn clue about any of this. But Mr. Lohmeyer in particular, Mr. Thibault in particular, God bless you for your viewpoints and your willingness to sacrifice what you have for the things that you believe in, because you are correct. Our military is being destroyed right now, and we all know it. We all know it. And while I wish and I hope that it still remains the best military in the world, I'm not sure that that's the case anymore, and we better damn well come to that realization and get after that. Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Thank you. Good points. Mr. Frost.